Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy freaking Friday, everybody. I am your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to talk through one big saga finally ending. Brandon Aiyuk is a happy man. Also got some notes on Rashee Rice and some battleground backfields, some muddled situations that we will be sorting through. And by we, I mean myself and none other than Fantasy Life's finest Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. What's up, Dwain? Happy Friday, man.
What's up, man? Triple zeros pop back up on you because it's time, Ian. We've been preparing, but fantasy season's here. Some of you have your draft this weekend. I honestly, if I'm in a home league and I have the ability to wait for the draft on this weekend, it is really fun. It's tough because, it's a Labor Day weekend. A lot of people are traveling, but you have all the news. This next Thursday, you're going to have a game. So excited for all of you getting to partake in that.
I have my 32-team league draft tomorrow, and I'm going to be at a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. So please, cell phone service guys, hold up. Do not want to be autoed in that one. So again, plenty of stuff coming on the way today. But first, guys, a quick word on Fantasy Life Plus. Fantasy Life Plus, our premium product over here at Fantasy Life. And again, you guys have heard me talk about the Draft Champion Tour, our consensus ranks, our projections. The only thing I need to apologize for is I actually finally did go to Chipotle yesterday for the first time in a while. And I have really been overstating, the price here. $21 for double steak and a drink in 2024. What the heck, guys? That's freaking crazy, Chipotle. So when I say we're cheaper than a Chipotle burrito, I thought it was like half that. So, hey, Chipotle, if you guys want to sponsor us, I will not be saying bad things about you. But just a reminder that, again, under $10 per month, even for our tier 2 package. That's what I've been trying to say this whole time. So not trying to break your bank. Your tier 1 package, again, we're talking under $40 for the entire year. So, again, much cheaper than a Chipotle burrito is our new motto over there. So Fantasy Life Plus, check it out. Is that not insane to you, Dwain? I mean, a man's just trying to eat a burrito and $21, man. That was, freaking crazy for me to find out. But regardless, I'm over it. Yeah, seriously.
Try feeding the family. One day you'll be there, Hartitz. When I go through a drive-through, it's $100, period. Just get out a hundy.
Fair enough, my friend. All right, so I've got that out of my system. Just like the 49ers got the Brandon Aiyuk situation out of their system as well. 4 years, $120 million with $76 million guaranteed. It was a nerve-wracking situation, Dwain, and he had been moving down the ranks. Now, with everything ready to go, where are you drafting Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, I think Brandon Aiyuk in home league fantasy draft should be like a round 4 pick. I think he goes around the same range that you're going to. I would take him after, Jaylen Waddle, taking Nico Collins still over him, taking Drake London over him. All the guys that have, well, with Collins and Aiyuk, I think that's the one you could argue, Ian, like, is that close, right? Because we're talking about the same kind of situation. Really good players on offenses that we like that should throw for a lot of yards, but also a lot of competition. But I do give Nico the slight lean because I just think CJ Stroud has more upside as a passer than Brock Purdy. And I think there's also a slight chance that we could see the Texans actually to come out and throw the ball a lot versus we know the 49ers are always going to stay committed to that run game. So I do give it the slight lean to Nico, but right in that range. So I think round 4 is about where I would take him. I think the big question, Ian, that I would have for you is, would you be willing to take Brandon Aiyuk over Malik Neighbors? And for me, the answer is no. I'm just taking Malik Neighbors. I feel like that could be a bad decision, but that's where I'm at.
I mean, we're talking about Neighbors potentially earning 50 additional targets over what Aiyuk could be seeing this year. That's the problem. There's no debating how good the guy is, whether you want to use PFF receiving grades, ESPN advanced ratings, yards per route run. Everything tells us that Aiyuk was a top 2 wide receiver last season. Targets started becoming tracked in 1992, and Aiyuk just averaged the most yards per target among any wide receiver with at least 100 targets in a season, again, since that date. So, yeah, incredible real-life player, but Dwain, only so much you can do when you're in an offense also feeding Christian McCaffrey, also feeding Deebo Samuel, and also feeding George Kittle. So I'm with you there. I would be taking Malik Neighbors. What's this do, though, to Deebo Samuel? Because, again, just one football to go around. As much as those rush attempts are nice, we do prefer the targets in fantasy land. Someone that's still in your top 15 or, maybe even a little bit lower.
Yeah, no, Deebo's been cratering. I've been, doing best ball drafts, because we've got all these contests filling and, we just love to be drafting because we're sickos,
oh, yeah.
But it's nice because you get the immediate market reactions, right? People that are investing their money and you get to see real time what's happening to Deebo. So in those contests, he's falling about a round right now to a half a round, which I think is about right, Ian. I think Debo's still a fine player because he's going to get those carries. That's always going to be there for him from Kyle Shanahan. So, he's going to have 300 to 400 rushing yards in his bag with 3 to 4 rushing touchdowns. When you put that on top of, even if he's like a 900-yard receiver and scores 4 touchdowns, well, suddenly you're like, oh, I got a guy that just got 1,400 yards, gave me a shot at 10 touchdowns. That always keeps Deebo Samuel in play. I prefer him over Aiyuk just because I do think his role is more insulated. One, the NFL mostly plays zone coverage. Who's their number one target against zone? It's Deebo Samuel. And if you think about it, guys, the way it makes sense, he plays the underneath coverage stuff. He's running the underneath the coverage routes. He's the one getting all the screen plays. The 49ers are often setting up their play, and they're just dictating it, for Purdy. Okay, great. You see zone. You're going to Deebo. You see man, you're coming backside to either Aiyuk or Kittle. And that's why Deebo continues to get fed so much. The NFL plays zone 70% of the time. So once you put that together with those touches in the run game and just the pure sweetness of, Deebo Samuel with a football in his hands, the biggest thing you have with Deebo, Ian, is because he is so good. And we see this with some players like that. He's so physical. He's just so twitchy. He has all these things about him. He does have to battle some injuries typically. So I know we don't like to say guys are injury prone, but whenever I look at Deebo's, projections and I put those together, I do dock him an extra game. So there are players I take just a little bit more cautious approach. So that's the one thing with Deebo. But even in a loaded offense like this, he is a guy that can still give you a wide receiver one season because of the versatility of his role. So I think he's fine as a round 3, round 4 fantasy pick in home league drafts.
Debo's almost becoming underrated at this point. I get it, guys. He didn't have the best Super Bowl in the world. But if you go back literally one game before that, you can find him breaking freaking 9 tackles or whatever it was against the Lions, really providing that offensive spark when it couldn't get much going. So, in the preseason, Dwain, the dude makes a sick contested catch on the first play of the game, and all anyone wants to talk about is, he didn't even separate out there. So, Deebo Samuel, absolute dog, and Brandon Aiyuk, again, a happily paid man. Now, only Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, and our one true sun god making more annually. So good for Aiyuk on getting that bag. And Dwayne, good for our bags. I've been drafting Rashee Rice again and again because he is not expecting to be placed on the commissioner's exempt list. Clarity from @NFL PR guy, who is a PR guy in the NFL office. Quote, we do not anticipate he'll be placed in the commissioner's exempt list unless there's a material change in the case. So again, Dwayne, been making the educated guess throughout, and people have been listening to our real-time sports, streams. They've heard us talk about Rice plenty because we cannot stop drafting the man in round 4. But after getting this news, fully 99% good on Rashee Rice now?
Yeah, so Rashee Rice, I've still just given him 15 games in the projections, Ian, and he comes out as a top 16 wide receiver. I'm just still being cautious just in case, something happens. But obviously, if he did get a suspension, it would be larger than that. But let me just tell you, if I bump him up to 16 games, which is what I project all wide receivers at, except the ones that, you have a little bit of injury-prone worries about, he's the wide receiver 10. He's the wide receiver 10 in half and full PPR league. So, and I'm not giving him a crazy target share. I'm assuming that Hollywood Brown is going to get his. I'm assuming that Xavier Worthy is going to get his. I'm assuming that Travis Kelce is going to get his. I've only got Rashee Rice with a 22% targets per route run. He was way above that. So I've actually taken him down for target competition. But what's the common denominator all of these players have? It's freaking Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So, guys, we just don't need to overthink it. Rashee Rice is my most drafted player. I'm up to 270 drafts now this offseason. He passed the 30% threshold. I've been taking the guy everywhere in round 3 in leagues where I know I have to. You and I, Ian, playing over on Real Time Sports, we've been smashing Rashee Rice in the early 4th round pretty much every single draft where he's been there, we've taken him. I think there's only been 1 or 2 drafts where we didn't get Rashee Rice, and it's because somebody took him before we could get to him. So he is my most drafted player. I think he is the most undervalued player. And if you guys are playing on Yahoo, you're playing on ESPN, all of those formats, this guy's still going in the 70s. But what I would say is there is starting to become enough, speak around him where people are getting excited, and we're seeing more and more analysts get on board with him. So don't wait too long in your drafts. If you are drafting this weekend, the way I would be reading that, you're trying to use that to your advantage. But the latest, Ian, I think I'm waiting is probably round 5 at this point. I'm probably going to go ahead and pull the trigger on Rashee Rice right in that range. If I need to, I will do it in round 4 if you're in a 3 wide receiver full PPR.
Rashee Rice or Malik Neighbors?
I'm still going to take Malik just because I don't have to worry about any, risk as far as like, a suspension, but it's really close. It's really close. Like, I mean, I think you could easily make an argument that it should be Rashee Rice.
Rashee Rice or Jaylen Waddle?
Rashee Rice.
Rashee Rice or Nico Collins?
Nico.
Yeah, that's about where he is, though. Right on that wide receiver.
And to be fair, I have Waddle right there in that same range, too. Right there around neighbors. We really love Waddle as well. He's a value right now in home leagues also. But that is the range. You're right. That's the sweet spot for him.
We love all those players. You just could have said yes, and I also would have accepted that answer for it as well. So
I love the game,
Rashee Rice, go ahead. Yeah, it's a great game.
Yeah, you have to think yes, no, yes, because that's how you really figure out like where they should tier. Obviously, we're thinking through a lot of things, and we've researched a lot of things to get to those answers. But it is a game you like to play with yourself because it helps you when you're on the clock, in your fantasy draft, because it's good to already have those things sorted. Because you and I both know, Ian, sometimes, especially when we're first doing our early drafts and we're trying to like come to an agreement on things, it can be tough because you're trying to answer those questions while you're on the clock. It's a lot of pressure.
That is why I like to draft all year round, even if it is lower stakes, because it forces you to kind of ask yourself those questions versus, just moving a name up or down a spreadsheet where you don't exactly have the same sort of money on the line. So again, Rashee Rice off the exempt list. And yeah, guys, after he got that full-time role, I should say, in week 12, 16.95 PPR points per game would have been good for wide receiver 9 status throughout the regular season. So good stuff there. Hopefully you were buying that dip throughout the offseason. All right, guys, before we get into some battleground backfields, want to quickly roll through some additional news that we had go down on Thursday. So Jamar Chase still not practicing. We'll see if the Aiyuk situation speeds things up there. But yeah, the Bengals organization maybe not quite as deep-pocketed, or at least not as willing to reach in there as some of these other squads, to put it nicely. Rams head coach Sean McVay did say Puka Nacua is practicing fully and quote-unquote he'll be ready to roll. Good news for Puka bag holders ahead of week 1. Meanwhile, Jets head coach Robert Saleh said that Mike Williams will be available week 1, but won't be 100%. Saleh's specific quote, "We're going to be very smart with how we use him, but he's going to be plenty available to make his mark felt." As we saw last year at Breece Hall, they are okay easing these guys in. Would expect by week 4 or week 5, though, Big Mike back to his usual, every down role. Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce on if he expects Brock Bowers to play. Yeah, I feel really good about that, to be honest. Match is what he's been saying throughout the preseason. We do expect Bowers to play through that foot injury in week 1 and beyond. Also, Pierce on his backfield, and then Alex Madison, Dylan, all those guys, Amir, they've all kind of got a role within the offense, but to be honest, early downs, a lot of them are Zamir White. That's what I expect to see. So nothing too groundbreaking, but when we did, again, get some concerning preseason usage with the artist known as Zeus playing in the third quarter, good to hear Pierce, again, really state that Zamir is their lead RB1. Also, keep an eye on Cowboys wide receiver Brandon Cooks not practicing with a knee injury. The Saints actually end up waiving kick returner / running back Kene Nwanu from the Vikings with a failed physical designation. And finally, sad day, Browns released former Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Snoop Huntley. So the 4 quarterback room is now down to 3. Hopefully a team will go out there and give the former Pro Bowl talent another opportunity out there. So that's the news, guys. And now a quick word on our friends over at New Era. If you guys have been tuning into Dwain and I's real-time sports videos, we've been rocking the hats for whatever player we're drafting in the first round. And yeah, we got them, and I freaking love them, guys, whether it's going to be, your flat bill, more traditional. They have bucket hats, which I love as well. All the New Era goodness is, pretty freaking great. So overall, fantasy football fanatics, again, there is a new era at FantasyLife. And what better way to elevate your game than with the official cap of NFL training camp from New Era, from the iconic snapbacks to the classic fitted caps. As the official cap of the NFL, New Era offers the widest selection of licensed NFL headwear, ensuring you look sharp whether you're in the stands or strategizing your next fantasy football move. With New Era's precision fit and innovative designs, every move you make is backed by unparalleled comfort and style. Discover your new level of style and show off your team pride with the all-new collection of New Era training camp caps. Click below to shop now and find your perfect fit for glory. Again, gotta love some New Era. Dwayne, it's Battleground Backfields Day on the Fantasy Life Show. What a freaking time to be alive. We got 8 different situations to go through, something like that, maybe 6. Who can really know for sure at this point? But starting things off, we got to talk about one of our favorite, and my favorite, I mean least favorite people in the NFL, Arthur Smith's backfield over in Pittsburgh. We got Najee Harris, we got Jaylen Warren, we got maybe Cordero Patterson. What did you see out of this group in the preseason? And accordingly, what are we expecting in 2024?
Yeah, so Arthur Smith is a wild card. I'm glad that we're just starting here. I feel like he's a guy that catches strays pretty much every show. And when we're not talking about Arthur Smith, we're talking about Arthur Smith. But yeah, when you look at Najee and Jaylen Warren, we also have CPAT. We have one of your all-time faves. You are the Cordell Patterson fan club leader, after all. I do think that all three guys are going to be in the mix. I do think Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are going to be the two lead guys. And it's one of those situations, Ian, where like you look at the players and Jaylen Warren, he pops in every way, right? Whether you're talking about, I put out my Guys article this morning. Folks can check that out for free over at FantasyLife. But this is just, one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. And whenever you look at what he can do on a per touch basis, it's still hard to not get excited, even though we know Arthur Smith could just be completely unwilling to use him, or he might get CPAT more involved than what we would think. But just if you look at, Jaylen Warren last year, Ian, PFF run grade was 85.3. And so this is a minimum of 150 attempts. That was 11 out of 37 running backs that qualified. Missed tackles forced per attempt, 35.7%, number one out of 37 backs that qualified. Average yards after contact, 3.7. The league average is 2.9. He ranked second out of the 37 qualifiers. And then targets per route run. Oh, yeah, he's also awesome in the receiving game, 27%. That was third out of 37 qualifying running backs. So the guy has just been able to do amazing things when he gets the ball. He also is good enough that you want to prioritize him in the passing game. What I'm going to say about Jaylen Warren is if he ever gets to a stretch this year where he is the lead back in Pittsburgh, he could win your fantasy league. And I think that's the main thing you've got to remember. When I look at Najee Harris, I also think that where he's going in drafts, Ian, he could be very valuable to your fantasy team. I don't think he would win you your league, but I do think that he could be a value with where he goes. Now, if I'm just having to chop this thing up and assume that everyone's healthy for the entire season, I've got it as a pretty close split. I've got Najee actually leading the way in the rushing attempts by a little bit, but giving more of the passing down work to Jaylen Warren. Those two guys just kind of rotating in and out all game long. And that makes it a little tough because we're not super excited about the Steelers' offense, but we do know they'll be committed to the run. Like if you look at Arthur Smith all the way back to his time in Tennessee, he has been very committed to running the football. That's also part of Mike Tomlin's DNA. Whenever he doesn't have a quarterback that can just drop back and sling it all the time like Ben Roethlisberger, he's shown us since then that he's willing to lean much more into that run game. We know we've got the quarterback challenges. So I do think if we look at all the teams that don't have an Anthony Richardson, because Russell Wilson's not that level. Now they might end up with an Anthony Richardson. They might get Justin Fields onto the field at some point. But I think this will be one of the teams that ends up running the ball maybe like the fifth or sixth most in the league, maybe fourth most. I think they're going to be one of the highest, total team attempts as far as rushing attempts go. So I think there is enough to go around, but I think this is really more of a split. But when I'm drafting, I got to be honest, and I've drafted a ton of teams. I'm 80% Jaylen Warren and 20% Najee, across all those drafts that I've done, just because I think his upside's so much higher.
I think if we have certainty that both running backs are playing 17 games, you could make a reasonable, projection that Najee will score more points than Jaylen Warren. But it's that boom upside, it's that best case scenario, it's that first or last mindset that does have us, buying more into the lottery ticket in Jaylen Warren. So maybe he is the lead back, Dwain. Last year in Atlanta, we saw Bijan Robinson have 272 touches, Tyler Algier 204, and then in Pittsburgh, Najee Harris 284 touches, Jaylen Warren 210. So similar splits going on, but who's to say Warren couldn't maybe be that lead dog with Arthur Smith, potentially coming to town, more outside zone concepts, which potentially do fit Jaylen Warren a bit better. So you did mention the potential problem here, and that is Justin Fields. As much as we would like to see him out there for our Justin Fields bags, that's the only way I really see these guys not returning, again, some quality upside RB3 value with the potential for more should one go down. Because you look at the Steelers, you look at the Falcons, you even look at Russell Wilson's Broncos, all three of those groups were top 6 offenses in terms of expected PPR points per game last year. The Bears, they were, I think, bottom 3, bottom 4. And we see them with the Eagles. We see them with the Ravens. Teams with those mobile quarterbacks who are scrambling instead of checking down. And again, factor into the equation near the goal line. Just not exactly a recipe for fantasy success. So Jaylen Warren is our preferred pick out of Pittsburgh. Dwayne, the only, again, just thing holding him back is if something happens to Najee or something happens to Jaylen and CPAT actually does have a bigger role than expected. Yeah. That's the one problem, man. We did see signs of that in the preseason.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise us because it's Arthur Smith. And that's the one thing that you've got to remember. I thought about that one, and you and I have talked about it a lot on the live draft streams that we've done, and folks can go check those out. Like, we put them up. They're $300 drafts. You can see what's happening from all the different positions that we draft from. But Ian and I really, in those, we talk through the players, but we talk a lot about strategy as well. So be sure to check them out. But we've talked about these players, specifically. And I know at one point you were pretty worried about CPAT. But like, the more we sat there and thought about it and looked at the fact that Arthur Smith did have CPAT last year, right? And he didn't really get him involved. Now, we never saw a stretch of games where we were missing Bijan Robinson or Tyler Algier to see would he then let CPAT step up. But we are talking about an older player. They do value him as the guy handling the kick returns, right? And probably doing, I don't know if he'll do any of the punt work. We know he's going to get all the kick return work. I'm really interested in seeing him in this new format and what that looks like. So I don't know. I still feel like if either one of the other guys went down, their roles will expand. I do think CPAT's role expands, but I think the other guys would also get a little bit more work as well. And again, I'm the most confident with Jaylen Warren because I think he has an every down skill set. Najee has an every down skill set, quote unquote, but like, he's not electric in the passing game. And the one other thing, the Steelers, when I think about him, it's like, okay, you've got George Pickens, and then what? Like, we don't know. Like, you're hoping Roman Wilson, who hasn't even practiced, right? It's going to be a while before Roman Wilson would be anything as a rookie. You got Van Jefferson slotted to play all those snaps outside. I mean, we got Pat Freiermuth, who you don't even want to put on the field. Like, you're giving the guy like 50% route participation. So I feel like Jaylen Warren, like, is honestly like the sneakiest way to get some underneath stuff going in the passing game. So, but I will say that's where CPAT could also be good too. I mean, the guy was a wide receiver coming out of college, and then they ended up transitioning him over to running back. So I agree with you. It's not enough, though, to scare me off of those guys, but it could dampen their ceiling case scenario if they decided to give CPAT 30% of the work if one of them went down.
CPAT, just 59 touches in 14 games last season, so shouldn't be this 1A, 1B, 1C situation. But yeah, it could potentially just lower the handcuff ceiling just a little bit there. So we're not trying to slander Najee. I thought he honestly probably looked the best he has since entering the NFL, or at least since his rookie season last year out there. But it's more so Jaylen Warren just being that freaking good. Really does look like he's, Najee on 2x speed out there when he is doing his thing. So good stuff there, Dwain. Another backfield that has some new parties involved is residing in Nashville, the Tennessee Titans. Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears. We've heard from Callahan. We've heard from Holtz. Really the entire offseason, constant drumbeat of these running backs being essentially co-starters and interchangeable. Are you buying it based on what we've seen in the preseason?
Yeah, I absolutely am. It's really interesting, though, because in drafts right now, you get to see these real-time adjustments happen. Tyjae Spears is falling down draft boards, and Tony Pollard's moving up. Why? Because he scored one touchdown when they decided to put him in a preseason game. And guess what? The game before, when they started them, which was game 1 of the preseason, they all rested in game 2. It was Tyjae Spears getting that carry. Right. So some of this has come down to luck of when the players have been on the field. And the coaches may have just wanted to see Tony Pollard in that situation because Tyjae Spears, guess what, guys? Go back and watch it. Already made a sweet cutback down at the goal line where the whole right side of the offensive line was bottled up. He makes just a smooth cut to the backside, smooth sailing straight in the end zone to score a touchdown. So both of these guys are capable. What I'm going to say, though, Ian, is the way this preseason utilization has come down, if you look at it on the surface, it's 58% of the snaps to Tony Pollard, 42% to Tyjae Spears. That would seem like, oh man, Tony Pollard actually is the 1A. And we've got, Tyjae Spears sitting here as a 1B, maybe even like a high 2A. But then once you dig into it, like you see those drives that Tony Pollard took, and it's fine. Giving Pollard a slide edge is fine because he's the first back that's getting on the field. But his drive with the starters was longer than the second drive, which Tyjae Spears took in both games with the starters all still on the field. So if you look at it from that high level, it looks like, oh, this is a Tony Pollard thing. But really, it just comes down to how long Tony Pollard's drives end up being versus Tyjae Spears. Oh, by the way, both players mixed in on the other player's drives. So on those first drives by Tony Pollard, guess who got a sprinkle of snaps? Tyjae Spears. On those second drives with Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard was getting a little bit of a sprinkle of snaps. So I think these guys are really going to be rotating. It's still going to be much closer than what people think. And it makes me really like Tyjae Spears even more in drafts if people now are suddenly thinking that Tony Pollard has pulled away. And I still like taking Pollard, but he's moved up like a round. Say he's moved up a half a round, Ian, and Tyjae Spears has dropped a half a round since the last preseason game. So now You have these guys going 2 to 3 rounds apart in drafts. I just drafted this morning on a team, and I got Tyjae Spears 20 picks past the average draft position. So I still think they're going to be very close. And you mentioned it. It's not just the preseason games. The coaches have told us this all along, and their skill sets tell us that they are interchangeable backs, both really good in the passing game, both smaller backs that are explosive. You give them a runway. We know they want to run more 11 personnel. They're both really good fits for what the Titans want to do this season.
And just like Najee and Jaylen, we can be fairly confident that if anything happens to either running back here, the other guy legitimately becomes an RB1 option overnight. So Pollard obviously saw him handle over 300 touches with the Cowboys last year. And just from the eye test, it does look like he has some of that juice back in the preseason, which is great. And then with Spears, man, please, for the love of God, take care of yourself. Stop trying to hurdle people out here in the preseason. Chill out, man. But looking at what he did as a rookie, joined Tyler Algier and Derrick Henry as the only 3 running backs with PFF grades north of 70 in rushing, receiving, and the ever-important pass blocking. So legit 3-down backs in Tennessee and an offense that could wind up being pretty fantasy friendly should the defense continue to suck and they want to toss the ball around the yard just a little bit more. All right, Dwayne, let's talk about the hometown squad for you at least. The Dallas Cowboys. We got Ezekiel Elliott. We got Rico Dowdle. We got Deuce Vaughn. And we even have number 20 now, Dalvin Cook in town. So got a nice note from Mike McCarthy. I will read first before I throw it over to you on Rico Dowdle yesterday. He'll have a lesser role in special teams just because of workload focus. He's a complete running back, plays all 3 downs. I think his pass protection from his rookie year to now has become one of his best assets. So the anti-Kyren Williams role on the table for Rico Dowdle. Dwayne, thoughts on who winds up leading this committee and who you're most comfortable drafting at cost?
So Rico Dowdle, about a month ago, we started talking about quite a bit. And, we put him in some sleeper articles and things like that. And it was so easy at that time, Ian, just to click on his name because he was just going too far after Zeke. There was just probably too much assumption in the market that it's just going to be Zeke. And so you were getting this 2 to 3 round discount on a guy like Dowdle going after Zeke. Well, then they got close together, and I was like, okay, I'll keep taking Rico Dowdle. And now Rico Dowdle has leapt past Zeke by 2 or 3 rounds. And that's where it's I do agree. I would rather bet on the younger player, but this is Rico Dowdle, Ian. This is a guy, he's not been able to get in a starting lineup. He's 26 years old. It's not like he's some second-year player that they were just already brimming with all this hope about. It's kind of like, well, we didn't do anything, so we're going to give it to Rico. Now, again, I'm not trying to, hate on Rico. We know at the running back position, volume is king. And I do still think there's a really good chance that Rico is going to be the more efficient of these 2 backs just because Zeke, he's got a lot of wear and tear. Now, I think there are certain things, though, that Zeke is still going to do better than Rico Dowdle. And this is where I want your thoughts, Ian. But I do believe that Ezekiel Elliott will get the carries inside the 5-yard line, or the majority of them. I'm not saying Rico's not going to get any of them, but I could totally see the Cowboys still using him in that way because Zeke is still really good at that. He's a guy that still has all that lower body strength that you want. Zeke, guys, you can make fun of him for his lack of ability to hit these big, long plays unless he's just in the wide open field. But when it comes to power, when it comes to vision, when it comes to, getting skinny through the hole, Zeke still does all of those things, really almost as good as anyone else in the NFL. And so I think they're going to use that when they get down inside the 5-yard line. I think he's going to get a lot of those carries. I think there's also a chance, Ian, that Zeke gets on the field more on passing downs because they're going to trust him in pass protection. We saw this in the past where we were just like, how is Tony Pollard not on the field for passing downs? And it was Zeke all those years. So now we have a situation in Dallas where all we have is CeeDee Lamb. And we have we like Ferguson as well, but there's opportunity here for these backs to pick up some targets. So what I'm going to say is I still prefer Rico Dowdle in a vacuum, but I think that now Zeke is the one that's getting underpriced, and he's the guy that I've been clicking on a little more in drafts. So essentially this is me copping out of saying I'll just take the cheaper one, but it is the Cowboys. So I want to hear your thoughts, though, on Zeke and that role that I just outlined.
Well, it is just funny, you look at our ADP tool, which I'm checking out right now, and we have ESPN Sleeper and Yahoo on the left, and then we have some higher stakes sites, FFPC, NFFC, Real-Time Sports on the right, and it's flipped. Zeke is the, far cheaper one in terms of, far more expensive one on the more casual sites. He's going pick 110 on ESPN, Dwayne. Dowdle's at 163, but meanwhile, Dowdle is the more expensive one on all the higher stakes sites. So I think, I'm kind of with you. It just depends where you're drafting drafting. And when we have this uncertainty, yeah, just give me the cheaper guy, because it does seem unlikely that we see either party just completely take control of this backfield. And that's not even before we consider if Dalvin Cook could actually come in and carve out a few carries, which isn't necessarily going to happen. He's on the practice squad for a reason. But I'm with you, man, because as much as Zeke has not been good, I mean, 43rd in rushing yards over expected over these past 2 seasons. The last time we saw him in Dallas, he was only averaging 3.8 yards per carry, and that was with a better addition of an offensive line than we're likely going to see with the Cowboys this year. But when we do look at Zeke and we remove that $90 million contract he was, working under, I think it's a lot easier to appreciate his skill set, what he can do as a short yardage hammer, and obviously in pass pro as well. So look, when I can get Rico Dowdle literally in the last round of ESPN drafts, as I did in Mrs. Hartitz's company draft last night, felt good about that one. Yeah, sign me up for it. But yeah, Dwayne, once Zeke is the one starting to fall into the 140s or so, I'm cool with that as well. So I'm with you where I don't want to be a complete cop out here. But at the same time, it's a Cowboys offense that's ranked 10th and 9th in expected RB PPR points per game these last 2 years. Perennial top tier scoring offense as long as Dak Prescott has been healthy. Maybe the answer to which cheap running back to take is just yes.
Yeah, and here's the other thing I will say, because of the point you just brought up about their backfield and how fruitful it's been for fantasy. If they're that spread apart, there's no problem taking 2. There's no problem taking them both and seeing what happens week 1. And it might just be a complete mess where you're just forced to drop one of them and just hold on to one and hope that maybe you get some clarity. But if we do somehow come out week 1 and it doesn't really matter which one, but one of them is the clear leader of the backfield, getting 65% of the work, you're going to want them on your fantasy team, and then you can cut the other one. It's not like you're having to pay a premium pick for these 2 players. So it is one of the backfields, Ian, that I would be willing to take both of the players and see what happens, especially if you started your, fantasy draft off. Let's say you took a wide receiver, first, and then you come back and the running backs you wanted were gone again. So you took another wide receiver, and then maybe you did grab your first running back in round 3, but then you had to wait again because people just kept taking all the names you wanted. You took value at other spots. I think in those scenarios, you want to start targeting in on some of these on these teams where you could get both of the backs, but we like the team. You don't just want to do that with anyone. It's the Cowboys. I don't mind doing it with 2 of the Dolphins backs like Mostert and Jaylen Wright. Like I'm willing to with certain teams, and the Cowboys are certainly one of those, Ian.
It is a great point in terms of that, really the first couple rounds of roster construction, setting the basis for what running backs you want to necessarily attack later. We did a draft yesterday, Dwayne. We went superhero RB. We got Devin Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs with our first 2 picks. So guess what? They're locked into our RB1 and RB2 spots. So when it comes time to start looking at these running backs, going outside the top 120 picks, we were more willing to take, a flyer on guys like Blake Corum and Trey Benson and more pure handcuffs. Meanwhile, if we only have one and we're actively looking for someone that we can start during the early weeks of the season, that's when Rico Dowdle, when Chuba Hubbard, when maybe Jerome Ford, Jaleel McLaughlin become a bit more in play. So again, let those early rounds really help you, set the just precedent for what you're going to do in the rest of your draft. And you can check out those drafts Dwayne and I did on our, FantasyLife YouTube page. So more battlefield backfields to get through next. But first, guys, a quick word with our friends over at Experian. Experian is to your finances what FantasyLife is to your fantasy league. It is a tool and resource designed to make your life easier, which is pretty great. I mean, who does not want our life to be easier? The Experian app is free. That's right, freaking free, everybody, and serves as a one-stop shop for managing your financial health. With so many spending and subscription details to track, let Experian handle it for you. They'll find and cancel your unwanted or unused subscriptions, helping you save money and focus on what really matters. That's right, winning your fantasy league. Download the Experian app today. Dwayne, the Bengals backfield we've talked about a little bit recently because Samaje Perine will not be coming back home and messing it up, leaving us with just Zach Moss and Chase Brown. So haven't exactly gotten to see Zach Moss in the preseason, so we were projecting things a little bit here. That said, Zach Taylor literally came out yesterday and even just spoke about the 2 being interchangeable in all facets of the game. So Chase Brown versus Zach Moss, guys that we've talked about on our draft streams being fairly interchangeable even in our fantasy ranks. How do you see this shaking out once we get into week 1?
Yeah, I think that's a really positive thing because the concern with Chase Brown would be, can he get out there on passing downs because you're worried about your quarterback potentially getting killed? And so to hear the head coach say that, As much as we like Chase Brown's ability as the more explosive receiver out of the backfield, because you could just get it to him quickly in the flat. And if he makes one guy miss, like, the dude's gone. Okay. So like there's things that you like about that. And he is a player you want to get into space. But we've seen so many guys like that over the years, Ian, that we know they have that ability, but you never get to tap into it because the coaches don't trust them. So hearing that is really good. And this is what I'm going to say on these two. I think that Zach Moss will get a little bit more of the early down work. So I've got him projected for 47% of the team's rushing attempts, but I don't have Chase Brown very far behind. I've got him at 41%. I've got this as a pretty consolidated situation. We had Travion Williams waived the other day, so Chris Evans is still kind of hanging around, but I think it's just going to be these two backs. I don't think we're going to see a third back mixed in very much. I only have 3% of the work going to other backs, and then I have have a little bit of work going to the wide receivers. So when you look at the backfield, it comes down to those passing downs. And before I was a little bit worried, like, okay, like I like Chase Brown's ability there, but he might not be able to get on the field. But after hearing that same quote that you just talked about, I really tightened those together. So I've got a 40% route participation for Zach Moss, and I've got a 35% for Chase Brown. So I'm giving a slight lean here to Zach Moss, but I'm also acknowledging that Chase Brown is the more explosive player of the two, Ian, and they project really closely in raw projections because of that efficiency. Chase Brown comes out 29th overall, and then I've got 34th overall for Zach Moss. So I do think that it's going to be a pretty tightly split backfield, but it's an offense that we really like with the Bengals. And if at any point, because of performance or just because of an injury, whatever the case may be, either one of these guys steps into the lead role, you're going to have a guy that we're probably thinking about in the running back one conversation. And if they look good in that first week, we're going to suddenly be saying, wow, like we have the top back on a potent Bengals offense. Joe Mixon, man, that's all you got to look at. Look, we love Joe Mixon when he came out of college, like as far as a prospect, but like he's not the greatest running back anymore, but he still did really well in this offense as the lead back.
Mixon last 4 years, RB9 in PPR points per game, RB7, RB6, and most recently RB11. So they did wind up bringing back Travion Williams. These teams are cutting guys and then re-signing him to practice squad the next day. But again, Dwain, we saw Travion last year. He played more special team snaps and offensive snaps in every single game that he appeared in. So certainly not expecting him to be taking Chase Brown and especially, Zach Moss off the field for anything resembling, significant snaps out there. So again, in the year 2024, only so many workhorses out there, and they're going to cost you a pretty penny in fantasy drafts. We can live with two-back committees, and that certainly does appear to be what the Bengals are working with this year. So feeling good. Chase Brown, Zach Moss, yes, draft them when you get a chance. Prime 0 RB targets as things stand at the moment. All right, Dwain, the Chargers are a team where we have some new leadership. Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman, both guys who have quite the history with enabling some fantasy-friendly rushing attacks, both in terms of volume and their scheme. I mean, Greg Roman, my God, if you go back to just his last, 6 seasons leading the Bills and Ravens, these teams have literally ranked first or second in yards before contact per carry each and every time. So, hey, saw that impact already with the Chargers leading all NFL teams in the preseason in yards before contact per carry as well. So no, it is just the preseason. I get it. And we also had we had Tyrod Taylor and Lamar Jackson. Justin Herbert, while he is mobile, maybe not, quite as mobile as those guys, but we're feeling good about the rushing, upside of this offense, Dwain. And now for the ever important question, who's going to be the primary recipient between Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and maybe Kamani Vidal?
Well, yeah, and I mean, just real quickly, like this team is super invested, in the offensive line. You talked about the performance, in the preseason, but Rashawn Slater was their 2021 first round pick. We've got Zion Johnson, their 2022 first round pick. Then they had Joe Alt this year in the first round. Many people remember because they wanted Malik Neighbors to be going to play with Justin Herbert, but we got Joe Alt. And this is just truly, when we look at Harbaugh, this is what he does. He's going to build up this offensive line. He's setting this team up to be ready to pound the football. He is going to 100% lean into the run. Yeah, they still have Justin Herbert. He might have this team throwing a little bit more than what people expect. It might not be exactly like the Colin Kaepernick experience or even maybe the Alex Smith experience. I think he's probably going to throw the ball a little bit more because he has Justin Herbert, but it's still going to be one of the more run-heavy teams in the league. So when I looked at this one, Ian, originally I was just kind of giving, I was splitting this up. kind of evenly across the three guys to start the preseason. So we're talking like back in May. And when I say the three guys, we're talking about J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Kamani Vidal, who did make this roster. But like as the preseason, went along, as, we hear more and more of the training camp reports, all those sorts of things, the name that I just keep leaning into more and more is J.K. Dobbins. Now, he's got the injury history, which has been very concerning. In 2021, man, he had an ACL, LCL, and hamstring tear.
Yikes.
that just makes me, I feel pain right now sitting in my chair. And then in 2023, he comes back. He's actually looking good, and he has the Achilles tear. So it's been an unfortunate run of bad luck in the injury department for J.K. Dobbins. But man, he's only going to be 25 this season. The dude's going to be 25 when this season starts. And before the injury, in those 2 years, he looked like one of the best backs in the league. This is a guy that had 16% of his carries go for 10 plus yards. The NFL average is 10%. Missed tackles forced, 20%. The NFL average is 16%. And man, this dude's a beast after contact. Yards after contact, 3.3 versus 2.7. And go ask him. He'll tell you. He's like, dude, I'm good. I average 5 yards per carry. Tell me who else does that. We know Lamar Jackson helps out a little bit. But J.K. Dobbins, man, at age 25, would it be unreasonable to think that he has 80% of that left? And if he does, I think out of the gate, he's clearly the best back on this team. We like Gus Edwards, but he's still more of a plotter. Gus is not going to make extra things happen at the next level of the defense. He's a good between the tackles runner, and like he can give you power, but J.K. Dobbins is the most complete back coming out in week one. So I have gravitated recently to Dobbins, Ian, and I think you're getting there too. We've been drafting him more and more, but he's a name that I've really been trying to click on a lot more in fantasy drafts. So he's my pick to lead this backfield. My second place, honestly, would not be Gus Edwards. I would go, if I had to pick an early season hero, it's J.K. Dobbins. And if something were to happen to him, I think that probably Kamani Vidal, just going back and watching like his film in college, man, I think there's a lot to like there. And Thor Nystrom, our resident expert on this stuff. Thor's always out there grinding the film. He loves this guy. In fact, I took him in an industry draft, and Thor and Ian were there, and Thor comes up, and pats me. He's like, yeah, man, really good pick. You got Kamani. My whole draft could have sucked, but I got Kamani Vidal, and I felt really great because Thor, said I did a good job.
Hey, man, he's got that theoretical 3-down ability, which is all we can ask for in one of these late round pros. I mean, 5'8", 213 pounds, ran a 4.4 640. That's not too shabby. And guess what? 92 catches, 700 yards, and a touchdown during his 4 years at Troy. So I'm with you. I have soured a bit on Gus Edwards, just as we've seen the preseason progress and, facing the reality that it is certainly 1A, 1B right now between Gus and Dobbins. I mean, $50K guaranteed on the Dobbins contract. It wasn't a guarantee he was going to make the roster, but he did. And he's being called one of the team leaders right now. I'm with you, Dwain. Give me Dobbins again, especially on those, zero or hero RB teams where when you're in that point in the draft, you need to try to find someone that could feasibly be in your lineup sooner rather than later. J.K. Dobbins, someone that based on that week one utilization could be shooting up the ranks in a hurry come week 2 and beyond. So two more backfields we want to get through, everyone.
Going on right now on Dobbins has some great quotes going on social media. So you guys just go check it out. Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off, Ian. I know we got to get to the next one, but yeah, just go check out his quotes. This dude's on a mission. And I don't understand some of his quotes, but they sound very inspiring.
He's got some of those, wide receiver tweets going on per Denny Carter's, always fantastic outlook on things. So again, guys, quick word on DraftKings before we get to our last two battleground backfields. Hey everyone, with the football season kicking off, it is the perfect time to dive into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $250 back in bonus bets and 1 month of NFL Plus premium on us. That is something we can all celebrate. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Stay in on the action and use your $250 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet on touchdowns. And if sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $250 back in bonus bets and 1 month of NFL Plus premium instantly. As promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Dwain, the Washington Commanders, new era, Jaden Daniels, also shout out New Era. Love your guys' hats. Jaden Daniels, we got Cliff Kingsbury running the offense. We even got Anthony Lynn, now coaching up the RBs. And we have Austin Eckler, a former fantasy football legit RB1, joining forces with Brian Robinson. So we've seen Lynn, we've seen Kingsbury, both using multiple running backs before. How do you see this situation shaking out? Because as much as there might be a starter, presumably Brian Robinson, they do seem likely to be rotating these guys fairly frequently.
Now, we don't have a huge sample here, but we do have 28 snaps and 15 dropbacks over 2 preseason games with Jaden Daniels on the field. So the starters for the Commanders. And what we've seen in that time, 57% of the snaps did go to Brian Robinson Jr., 43% of the snaps went to Austin Eckler, 62% of the rushing attempts to Robinson. Only 15% to Eckler because guess what? Jaden Daniels is doing what Jaden Daniels is going to do. He's also getting some of those rushing attempts. But route participation squarely in Austin Eckler's corner, 53% versus 33% with a 13% target share. One of the better numbers on the team after you get past Terry McLaurin. So I think this one's pretty clear cut, Ian. I do believe that the style of backs that we think we have here are actually going to match up with what we're going to get as far as roles go in Washington. So I think Brian Robinson's going to handle most of the early down work, probably likely to get most of the carries inside the 5, but that is a spot where Eckler's been very good over his career. So I do want to say that there is a chance that Eckler does steal some of that work. We saw some of that in the preseason, but it'll be Eckler primarily out there on passing downs. And again, with the pecking order that we have at the wide receiver position, I mean, we've got Diami Brown. We're hoping Luke McCaffrey can become something. You got Zach Ertz versus, Ben Sinnott. It's really just Terry McLaurin. So I think there's room here that even though we have a scrambling quarterback in Jaden Daniels, that Austin Eckler could get quite a bit of work here as a receiver. And the other key thing there, Ian, being that he's not just a behind the line of scrimmage guy. So even though you may have a scrambler, this is a guy that can work down the field, give you those nice route combinations. So I think both are viable in fantasy. If I had to choose, though, and I only get to pick one of them, I'm going to go ahead and lean to Brian Robinson Jr. I think in a full PPR, Austin Eckler is definitely more appealing than in a standard league. I would be avoiding Austin Eckler.
Looking at the last periods we had of Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn leading offenses, yeah, they did throw the ball despite the mobile quarterbacks. Kingsbury was 13th in running back targets, and Lynn was second, obviously with a lot of those going to Austin Eckler himself. So I'm with you, Dwayne. I think Brian Robinson kind of in that, Javonte Williams, RB3 range. You got the Titans running backs there. He could be a guy where, especially if Eckler is looking a bit more on the wash side as he does enter his age 29 season, we could be looking back on saying, yeah, good running back with the potential to breeze past 200 rush attempts. Why are we not clicking on him a bit more? So not saying Eckler can't get going. We did see Kingsbury in 2020. Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds were top 32 running backs. And in 2021, James Conner, RB8, and Chase Edmonds, RB26. So we've seen them, again, use these 2 running back committees before. It does seem like Brian Robinson should be the lead, at least for Meow. Dwayne, last one, and it is potentially an important one. Yes, the overall offense might suck, but that did not stop them from still having some fantasy-friendly RB opportunity. That's right, I'm talking about the Denver Broncos. So no more Samaje Perine. That leaves us with Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and then Audric Estime and even Blake Watson. So how do you see this one shaking out, Dwayne? Is it going to be a Javonte Williams show or maybe a bit more split up than just that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be split up. Javonte, it's funny, is he's really climbing in fantasy drafts, which I think he should, because I think a lot of the early stuff was this guy's not going to make the roster. He's going to make the roster, guys. This is another guy, kind of like the whole situation we just talked about with J.K. Dobbins, right? Now, he hasn't had as brutal of an injury run, but a player that looked really great before the injuries, missed tackles forced, yards after contact, all those things you want. Last year really showed that he could be a value in the passing game for this offense. So he checks all those boxes as well. He is the bigger, more sturdy of the 2 backs. So I think he's going to lead this backfield, Ian. I think that he is. And I think that if you're looking for the handcuff to him, it's probably Audric Estime, one of their later round picks this year out of Notre Dame. He's going to be the guy that would fill in for Javonte if he got hurt. But the name here that's really surprised throughout this offseason, and honestly surprised last year with his limited work, he was really good. That's Jaleel McLaughlin. And I think he is going to get a lot of that passing down work in. And I think he might be in line to get a little bit more of the rushing work than what some people are thinking. So if you look at that last game where we had the snaps out there, where we had the starters out there for the Broncos in week 2 of the preseason, that was really that Bo Nix audition for the starting job when he won that. 58% of the snaps with the Broncos on their, really, I have to say, pass first mode drives, because they were trying to get a look at what? should Bo Nix be our starter? But it's very telling for us because that tells us that what they're potentially planning here is when they're going to be in a pass mode, which could happen a lot. They're not a very good team. McLaughlin was the guy that was out there. So 58% snaps in that situation really surprised me. He had a 67% route participation. So I think this is a similar situation to the one we just talked about. I do think that Javonte Williams will be the guy on early downs, like we talked about with Brian Robinson, but I think Jaleel McLaughlin will be taking over that receiving role. And honestly, I think he might get more work than what we just talked about with Austin Eckler, making him a super sneaky name, late in your fantasy drafts if you guys are drafting this weekend.
Especially full PPR, do not be afraid to throw a dart at Jaleel McLaughlin. So I think it was last week, Dwayne, we kind of did rich man, middle class man, poor man versions of backfields. And if we wanted to kind of look at the Javonte Jaleel split, rich man, the Detroit Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Middle class man, Steelers, as we talked about with Najee and Jaylen Warren. Poor man, maybe the Bengals with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. And the homeless man, we do have Javonte Williams and Jaleel. Because again, we're not expecting much from the Bo Nix experience in terms of just actual real life points being put on the board. That said, Dwayne, guess what? There weren't many points being put up on the board last year. Didn't stop this offense from leading the NFL in running back targets and being a top 4 group in expected RB PPR points per game. So, hey, Samaje Perine led the group in pass blocking snaps. Jaleel, that's the concern, Dwayne. It's kind of similar to Chase Brown. Hopefully he can actually get on the field because if so, man, if we're sitting here in week 2, 10 carries, 5 or 6 targets, that's going to be a waiver wire priority, Ed.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing here is, even if he can't block, as long as he plays the 2-minute offense, that's where you score the points in fantasy as a running back. So if you want to keep, Javonte Williams out there to handle the blitz stuff on 3rd and long, fine. Those aren't that valuable of snaps. I think what we've seen from McLaughlin is that we should expect him to probably get the 2-minute offense, in my opinion, out of the gate. And then you mentioned it is Sean Payton. He is the master of getting targets to running backs. And again, another wide receiver room where you've got Cortland Sutton and what? We have no clue. We don't really have anything. So I think the running backs will be the second most targeted group of players after Cortland Sutton.
A lot of situations to clear up, and we will finally have regular season data to do just that here in a short few days. So I want to thank you guys for joining us throughout the off season. I think I speak for everyone when I say I cannot wait for week 1 to finally get here. So we'll be back Monday through Friday, helping you guys try to capture those fantasy football championships, 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Fantasy Life Show. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.